Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by somebody who I have been dying to get on the channel, and it seems like it is the right opportunity now to get him on. You've probably seen him if you've been lurking around or catching up with anything Manchester United woman. It is the face of and co-host or host at this point of All For Women's United channel and podcast, as well as All For Women's Football. It is none other than Connor Roberts. Connor. How are you doing today?
Yes, not too bad. Making my debut on here. It's an exciting time to come on here and talk all things United. As you just said there, I talk for United for literal hours on All For United and obviously women's football as a whole on All For Women's Football. So excited to dive into United and what we've achieved and not achieved this season.
There's definitely a lot to talk about, and if you've not already figured out, the fact that he hosts All For United, then you definitely know he is the go-to person to talk about Manchester United. So I knew when we were gonna have to talk about this, it was gonna be nobody but you to get on this. Now, I think starting off with a little bit of warming up, I guess, for now the second part of the season. But before we jump onto that, I think it's important to talk a little bit about the January window that we just wrapped up, where United just wrapped up. Um, uh, I guess surprisingly or unsurprisingly, you let me know, a bit of a hush hush, very quiet January window from United, who maybe could have used an enforcement or two, in my opinion. But there was definitely a lot of talk with Mary Earps. There was an exit that was looming. We knew that from the summer anyway, before going into the January window. But what were your expectations going into the January window, and how did you assess it now that it is all wrapped up?
I think that the month, I'll start with the outgoings. I think the months leading up, it was looking potentially like obviously Mary Earps is the big one, as you said. We don't want another, as United fans, obviously, in the last couple of years, it's been very evident. Obviously, I guess our most known players gets to the end of their contract and they're leaving on a free, obviously, most notably with Honor and with Alessia last summer. So there was a feeling, I guess, amongst the fan base that Mary would likely go this window. We were out of the Champions League. The league form wasn't great, so it kind of seemed that that was likely. And we got into January, obviously, then new agency popped up for Mary Earps as well, and we all thought, right, this is happening. And it kind of got through the window, and it's like, hang on, this isn't looking likely anymore. And then played against Chelsea, the Chelsea game and the City game, and so on. And yeah, wasn't really looking like it was going to materialise. So that was the only outgoing I expected, potentially one of the loans. But as she said, with the incomings, I am amazed we didn't get somebody, especially in the back line, at least on loan. We've seen it in the last couple of years with United. We've got kind of like a 6 month loan signing in January, just as somebody there, really, because I said before, we're one defensive injury away from a big crisis. Mannion's coming back a little bit now, but she's still a few weeks away at the time of recording this. We don't know what's happening with Jade. Obviously, picked up a knock against Brighton. So at the moment, we've currently got 4 fit defenders. So that's what I mean. We're one defensive injury away from being in a massive crisis and moving one of the midfielders into defence. So yeah, I'm amazed that we didn't get somebody in, even just alone. I understand maybe obviously with current takeover things happening
Yeah.
with Ineos and so on, that it was never going to be a massive January window. We were never going to go out and spend loads of money. But I thought we'd at least get somebody on loan just to cover a little bit. But obviously we didn't, and we just play the hand we're dealt now, which is going to be interesting with the games that we've got coming up.
Yeah, I certainly, I think going into the January window had it in mind that they'll be looking for a reinforcement in the back. Like you mentioned, if it was not a full signing, it was at least going to be a loan till the end of the window. Do we know why that never materialized? If it was a clear kind of goal that was kind of rumored around from both the club that they were looking to get some kind of reinforcement. Is it the takeover? Because I mean, we've heard Mark Skinner be quite vocal in recent weeks about investment, which I think the activity that we've seen in the summer doesn't exactly back up what he's mentioning, given the pretty significant purchases that they've been able to have in previous windows. But was it investment? Was it a budget issue, or was it more that there was not a single target that they saw fit to bring in this window?
United definitely looked around. There was some noise, I guess, around certain players. I know that Mark Skinner definitely wanted defenders in. Obviously, that didn't materialize. Obviously, like I said, the ownership thing was definitely a factor in it, but I don't think that's a main reason as to why we couldn't get somebody in. Um, it's a real tough one because Mark Skinner obviously spoke, as you mentioned there, a lot about investment for several press conferences on the bounce. It was almost like the same quote. And then right at the end of the window, when he got asked about no incomes, he said we didn't want to just waste money. And it's like that to me is almost like a little bit of a nudge from people above him saying, stop saying you need investment and we need players. Because it was like an almost like a full flip from what he's been saying in previous weeks. So yeah, I think he's probably frustrated that he didn't get somebody in. As I
Yeah.
said there, with Jade now potentially out as well, we've got a bit of a problem on our hands in the back line. So yeah, I know that we looked at certain players, but yeah, it was always going to be a loan if we got anybody over the line.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's disappointing. I'm sure Mark's disappointed as well.
I think you can definitely tell the tone by towards the end of the January window of, yeah, well, maybe we weren't really looking to bring in somebody, which was very opposite, very different to uh what was being said going into the January window. But I'm glad you highlight the backline because it seems that United have struggled a little bit with the backline and just kind of overall defending. That's been quite clear in their stats. You can look at it from performances, certain numbers, certain I guess attacking patterns from the opposition that consistently targets United. And on the show you have very much hugely elaborated on that. But what is it that we're seeing here? Is it an issue with maybe some of the coaching staff changing from last season? Obviously, with Martin Ho being one of the big ones who departed. We've seen some new faces, I believe, on the staff end of things. Is it different players not having that opportunity to rotate as much? Obviously, you saw Gemma Evans have a go at it, and I'm not sure we'll see that anytime soon. But why are we seeing that hesitation or at least backstep in performances in the back line? Because the personnel hasn't changed that much. Noted that obviously Anna Battier is a huge miss from last season.
Yeah, it's interesting. As you said, obviously the only big change is at right back. And to be fair, since obviously Jade had a rocky start against PSG, but since then she's been solid. And some United fans would say one of our best performing players this season. So
Yeah.
on that argument, you're like, well, how has the defense almost regressed? And last season we were statistically one of the best in Europe. In all the top leagues, United were right up there. Whereas this season, as you mentioned, already conceded 50 in the league. That's three more than last year already. So I'm not too sure. Obviously, Martin Going's a big thing. I know that he did a lot of the stuff kind of in the in and around training and all those kind of things. So that potentially is a problem. I don't think it's just necessarily the back five either. I think when you've got a constant change in midfield, in the
Mm.
way that we had, Zellam's kind of taking on a new role as the lone six at times. Lads in and out of the team. Lisa's now getting a run of games. We've seen Miyazawa play there. We've seen such a mixed midfield. The wingers haven't always stayed the same. Leah's been in and out. Lucia's now playing, whether it be Jace or Paris on the right. So I think the whole team defensively, I don't think it's just the back five. And I also don't think, obviously, with the uncertainty of Marriott at the start of the season, probably didn't help. So you've just got so many factors. As you said, you've got new coaches coming in and one departing. You've got a new right back. You've got an uncertainty around a goalkeeper, and you've got a whole change in midfield. All of that coupled with low confidence because we went out of the Champions League, lost the derby, drew to Brighton, drew to Leicester.
Yep.
It all kind of just, I can imagine it all just being like a pressure cooker almost. And you just, every time a mistake happens in a game, it's just, oh, here we go again. It's kind of a bit deflating. So there's a number of factors. I don't think it's just one thing. And it's certainly, Honor is a huge miss, but it's not just because she's not in there that we are now conceding more goals than last season.
Do you think Mark Skinner knows his best 11 as of this time of the season?
It's interesting you ask that now because we're finally seeing a stable team. Like I just said a second ago, for most of the season, we've seen so many different combinations. Jace has played across the front three. Mallard's obviously been in and out with injury as well. Galton's maybe not hit form. She's been in and out with Garcia, and obviously that midfield. I said Zellam's the only constant one there. You've seen Toomey, Azawa, Lad, Lisa, Narson. It's yeah. So now I think we're finally seeing potentially what he thinks is our best team. With Jace finally pushed down the right. Fans have been calling that for that for a long time.
Mm.
Paris down the middle, Lucia off the left, and that midfield of Toons, Element, and Lisa Narson seems to be working. So potentially, I think maybe we found a formula that works. It's going to be interesting now. Mallard's getting back to full fitness, whether she's going to go in maybe off the left because you can't drop Paris right now anyway. Um, So I hope so. And he did say, I think it was around, I can't remember exactly when it was. It was around October, November, when he was talking about it was going to take months for this
Mhm.
team to settle and to see I guess, the full fruition of what they were trying to do. So maybe we are. Maybe we're getting to that point now where they've had a lot of time together because, there's a lot of new players in there and different, styles and so on, and a new style this season. So maybe it was just going to take a couple of months and now we're finally seeing it. But yeah, it's only been a couple of games. So I think come back to me in about a month's time where we've hopefully won a few in a row.
Then you'll definitely, and I feel like, yeah, you'll definitely have a better answer. But also, I think for Skinner would also have that everything's settled back in. You know, there's no incomings, outgoings now. You know, it's Mary Earps to finish the season with you. You know, there's no extra talk happening within and or around the club in terms of who's coming in and who's leaving until we approach the summer window, which is for a different conversation, a different time. But now we look for the rest of the season, the second part of the season. Let's talk slightly a little bit about the Conti Cup, which I know is a bit of a tough subject here, and I understand. But I guess how disappointing was it to lose the derby in the manner that was lost, given that they had already lost the first one and maybe you expected a little bit of different approach, given some analysis that they just lost to this opponent. Um, so let's weigh on a little bit on that losing that Manchester City game, which was not an easy group to be slotted in anywhere in the first place. But then seeing the things that happened with Aston Villa go down, and the rules are obviously not fit for a cup structure. You take away 3 points, that usually works perfectly okay in the league. It's not the league, it's a cup. There's knockouts. Some make it through depending on it's just a very complicated set of rules that didn't favor anybody and certainly didn't favor well, it certainly did favor Aston Villa, but did not favor United here. So what was that Conti Cup run like? Which didn't last very long, unfortunately, for United.
I mean, up until the City game, as you mentioned, it was obviously quite good. Obviously beat Everton, very comfortably. Obviously 7-0 there. Obviously went away to Liverpool, which so some teams have found a tough place to go and won there. And obviously the game against Leicester, so it was good, and
Hmm.
it was good to see Fallon obviously coming in. The derby was disappointing. Obviously that week was a huge week anyway. Obviously coming off the back of the Chelsea defeat, going into that derby, it was very much like we needed a response. It was a very changed team. We had Rachel Williams starting up as the number 9, and Lisa and Guerrero came into the midfield, and obviously Gemma Evans. I really felt for her because she's not a left back, and she got turned inside and out. Whether it was Kelly or whoever was rotating off that right hand side was, yeah, it was not a fun watch from that point of view. But
Yeah.
so it was disappointing, and like you obviously mentioned that. I'm not going to go into the ruling and all things like that because there's so many so
Yeah.
many things I could say on that. It's disappointing. I think 9 points. You'd think that would be enough to get you through, but obviously, with the Conti Cup format and things like that. So it's a tough group. I'm not going to, it's an all WSL group. You've got to go away to City, who are in great form this season, and in that game we played well in. And this is going to be. I don't want to go on this too much. I'm sure we'll talk about this when we talk about the second half of the season. But
Yep.
that City game just summed up the season for me. We play well in moments. Like there was parts of that game I thought we're dealing with City here. We're playing better, certainly better than the game at Old Trafford.
Yep.
And we had chances, and if we take them, I know obviously it's hindsight because if City take theirs, obviously it's a different story as well. But there was moments I looked at us, I thought I can see what we're doing here, but ultimately still led to defeat. So yeah, it's a real tough one to judge. But am I massively disappointed going out the Conti Cup? In the manner that happened, of course, but yeah, I'd rather, I think, top three go, obviously deep in the FA Cup again than potentially the Conti Cup.
Yeah, that's really what's left now, and it's kind of good that they don't have a huge schedule congestion coming up because, like you mentioned, they don't have, I guess, the depth that one would need when you're in multiple different competitions, specifically in the back line. So, looking at the FA Cup, obviously they were finalists last year. They face Southampton on this weekend, as the time of the recording. How do we see that going? Obviously, you're prepping for Arsenal afterwards, and that's going to be in mind for sure in terms of the rotated squad. But it's a non-WSL side that they're finally going to face. What are the expectations for that fixture and the FA Cup now actually moving forward afterwards?
Well, as you said, realistically, this is the only thing we can win. We're not. I'm pretty confident I'll sit on here and say we're not winning the league this season. So the FA Cup is really the only shot at that. I think people are overlooking Southampton. They're a good side. They gave Arsenal a very good run
Yep.
earlier on in the season as well. Obviously, with the late goal, the winner for Arsenal in that one. They are a decent side. Obviously, being away from home as well potentially has an impact. I would still expect us to go through. I think if we lose, but obviously the pressure's already on Mark Skinner as it is. I think then it's really going to be ramped up because that is pretty much our season ended from a trophy point of view. We've still got top three to potentially push for. So I would expect us to win, but I think he'll go really strong in terms of our best 11
Yep.
because I just don't see how it's not worth the risk. I know that you want some rotation in there, and obviously we don't know what's going to happen with Jade. So potentially, obviously, we're going to see a change there. Other than that, I think maybe one or two changes. I don't think he's going to change too much because I think he knows he's essentially fighting for his own contract right now, and I think he needs a very strong end to the season if he's going to be offered one towards the end. So it's going to be harder than I think people think, but I would still expect us to have enough to go through, especially when you look at the form that the likes of Paris and Jason, these kinds of players are on.
For sure. I think there's always a hard decision when it comes to rotating because you have to consider the players that are on form and who are finally on form because it did take them a little bit of time to get there. And so looking past that Southampton, which I think is going to be a very fun fixture, and like you said, maybe one that's slightly being underlooked, a little bit underrated, with the other draws. But afterwards, they've got Arsenal, and I think United have had not the easiest run of games. It's certainly been back-to-back big teams, but Arsenal are also in a tough situation, coming off a loss, obviously, again, at the time of the recording against West Ham. Um, Again, it's kind of the same mistake that they've had across season with struggling to break a low block, not producing much danger up front, and when they do, unable to clinically finish in the back, extremely shaky. And in some ways, again, resemblance of United. And obviously, these two have already had the first fixture, which was a draw in some crazy fashion. I, of course, as a Canadian, absolutely loved seeing Lacasse get that goal. Um, but looking at that fixture, it's a return fixture. It's going to be away for United, and pressure's already on massively for Skinner. And I think this one, whoever loses this one, is most definitely out of that title race. Um, what are your thoughts around that one? Because I feel like it entitles so much for both teams.
Yeah, I don't want to put the pressure on, but I think our season is almost riding on that game because I think we lose that. We're already four behind Arsenal as it is. We lose that, it's seven. Don't have the chance of playing them again. I think we're in trouble then for the top three. So that pretty much ends our league season as well. So not that, as we saw last weekend, obviously with West Ham, there's still points potentially that could be dropped, but I wouldn't expect too many more like that. I really don't know. It's the most excited I've been for a game, but also the most nervous, because it's there's so much riding on this. I think last season we did pretty well, obviously against the likes of City and Arsenal. Obviously doing the double there, and I think it was this season's just different. Obviously you mentioned the game at LSV without that late, I don't know what to call it, incredible goal. We'll go with that.
Ugh.
To nick the point there, and
Yeah.
there's been moments, like I said before, in our season, you think if that doesn't go in, does our season change? And obviously, Arsenal's change a little bit potentially. I'm not too sure, but yeah, it's huge. I really don't know how that game's going to go. What I will also know, I think it's for the storytellers amongst you. I think it's very set up for two things. It's set up for a Paris winner or for a Russo winner, and I think either one of those for the journalists and for the people that write the match reports and the blogs after the game will be
Yeah.
absolutely all over that.
I think a Russo goal is written in the stars, given how things went and the fact that this is the return fixture. But we saw bright moments against Arsenal with United, and like you mentioned, they've had them in trouble before, and by no means are Arsenal having the best season in the back. I mean, it's statistically one of the worst that they've had in some time. What does United have to do to not only win that game, but also kind of set themselves up for a good run for the remainder of the season?
Well, I think it rides on that, the second part of your question in terms of a good run towards the end of the season. It starts with this. We haven't been good against the top three this season, whereas last season we were, so I know we had two defeats to Chelsea, but we were still in those games and obviously did well against, got the draw to City away, beat City at home, and obviously beat Arsenal twice. So they were good last season, whereas this season we've not, apart from the point at home, had any other result against the top three that has been obviously on the winning side.
Yeah.
So the second part of your question, we need to win, I think, to catapult that. In terms of what we need to do in the game, obviously there's a couple of key Arsenal players that are going to need to keep quiet. It's going to be very interesting, obviously, if Jay Riviere is fit and obviously available to play in that one, because I think we're going to need her
Yeah.
on the right hand side and keep Hannah Blundell on the left hand side because she's going to have her hands full as well. Um, it's just about winning momentum. Again, it's why I go back to what I said a second ago about keeping that team that is currently winning, because I think we're going to need that going into Arsenal. There's not too much I would change. Like, I think Mallard's probably the only one potentially for Lucia Garcia, but the others, I think it would pretty much keep the same. But I think he might revert back to what he knows in these games, and I think Hayley Ladd will probably be the one that comes back into midfield just to add that little bit of, I guess, silly. That's not a word. Defensive. I can't say it.
Stability in the back.
That's the one. We'll
Yeah.
go with that. Just to kind of add a bit more cover
Yeah.
there, because there was moments in the Chelsea game again. I go back to moments again. We
Yeah.
looked good, for the period about 5-10 minutes after the goal, just before our time, for 10-15 minutes after half time. We looked good and we were competing with them, but we don't do that over a full 90 to get the win. We've got to do that over a full 90, not just in 10-minute periods in a game.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we're a little bit short on time here, so I kind of want to end this hopefully on a high note with a more of a positive perspective question. Obviously, I think there's a lot of high expectations riding from last season, and rightfully so. I think the fan base has every right to feel like that because they've achieved good things last season, making it to the Champions League qualifiers, as well as the FA Cup final. Understandably, clubs sometimes go in a bit of a not a rough patch. I wouldn't call this like a hugely rough patch, but a transitional moment where you have huge impactful players leaving, others coming in, changes in the coaching staff and whatnot. And it feels like this is what United are going through. But as a club, and I think as an overall, I guess if the United have a 5-year plan, 10-year plan, and they've laid out a lot of their goals to make sure that that club is able to sustain and be on that plan. What do you hope they're able to achieve this season? That you would look back and you're like, you know what? It started off a little bit rough, but this is what we got, and I'm kind of happy. Like, what is it that you would be satisfied with?
I think every fan's going to have a different answer. For me personally, I think it's getting back into the top three and sustaining Champions League. 'Cause I don't want us to be one of those teams that just getting it once every 5-10 years or something like that, and we're just kind of in and out. I want us to sustain that and stay in that top three, and next year obviously hopefully go further and make it into the group stages. Obviously a good run in the FA Cup. As amazing as last season was, it's one of the best seasons I've ever had following United around. That FA Cup final was really tough to take because we, in my opinion, played quite well in that game.
Yeah.
And it was horrible walking away from Wembley without a win. So going back to Wembley would be amazing, and obviously hopefully overturning that. So yeah, I think getting back into the top three, kind of cementing ourselves as a top three side, and just no more. I call them dodgy results, but no more dropping points in games at home and things like that where we're expected to go on and win, because we're going to need to win majority of the games now anyway. I don't want to get to the last game of the season again against Chelsea, needing to win to get into the top three as we had a couple of years ago, and that didn't quite materialise.
Yeah.
So yeah, get into the top three, good run in the cup, and no more injuries. Fingers crossed
No
on that one.
more injuries. Yes, I feel like they were kind of cursed from how good last season was with no injuries. That is just all the bad eyes have been caught this season. Of course, you're going to be keeping up with the Arsenal fixture before it, during it, after it, and everything to come for the rest of the season. So, how can folks and listeners keep up with everything that you are hosting on the channel and just everything all for Women's United?
Yeah, so thanks for having me on. It's been good to talk on another platform about United Women, as always. Yeah, so as you said, obviously, you're All For United WFC, if you want to come and find your United stuff. We do previews, reviews, literally every single week, 2 or 3 shows a week on there. And if you just like a broader women's football thing, All For Women's Football as well, if you want to come and follow us on there, because yeah, that's been up for a month or so now.
Yeah.
And we've got a really good game show idea as well for next week as well, which will be fun to come and watch along as well. So yeah, both of those things.
There you go. I'll be leaving all links to the obvious YouTube channels and shows down below, as well as their Twitter links, which kind of keep you up with when the shows are happening and when they're live. So head down below to check everything out. Connor, thank you so much for joining me. I also am very thrilled to see how they play out for the rest of the season. And yeah, who knows? Lacasse, Jade Rivere, both of them can go at it. I'm very excited to see how that one plays out before they get as teammates in the next few days.